That's what he wanted people to buy. It wasn't clear from the Post, I think, in his mind. But the way it reads is by the stocks which were going down, and then of
Yeah.
course went up massively. So it is a terrible mess, and he can easily stand accused of sort of trying to, at the very least, influence the market. Of course, he was trying to do that, but manipulate the market.
So Liberation Day will have to wait after Trump backtracked on the bulk of his tariffs in the face of market mayhem, despite claims from the MAGA faithful that he's playing 4D chess, or as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent maintains, this was his strategy all along. There really doesn't seem to be a coherent plan from the disruptor-in-chief. So is the method to the madness, or is it just madness? Let's talk to David Charter, Assistant US Editor at The Times. David, a very good afternoon from us. Which do you think it is?
Oh, well, it's as usual with Trump. It's a messy jumble of all of the above, because he's absolutely determined to have his trade war and to try and use the money from tariffs and the pressure from tariffs to revitalize American manufacturing. He's borne a 30-year grudge against China, pretty much, for hollowing out the American economy as he sees it, the manufacturing economy, ever since China joined the WTO. However, he's trying to apply his brutally aggressive business methods to government, and he was taken by surprise yesterday morning when the bond markets didn't do what the Trump administration expected. They've been relying for their muscle on the great American dollar, the great American economy, being as the most powerful cudgel in the world to basically browbeat every single other country into submission. And it stopped working yesterday morning, because what normally happens in times of economic crisis is that the rest of the world buy dollars. This may sound strange that they're buying into the very economy that's beating them up, but it's the U.S. Treasury bonds are supposed to be the safest haven for finance and capital in the world. And what happened yesterday morning was their yields, which is a reflection of what the American can sell their dollar debt at, started to go up instead of down. You would expect if everyone was clamoring to buy them, they could sell them at a low price and the yields would come down. But much to the surprise of the Trump administration, the yields started to go up yesterday morning. And they don't want the yields to go up. The whole point, one of the whole points of all of this is to bring down US borrowing costs to help alleviate the costs of their enormous debt, their enormous deficits, and of course everybody's mortgage rates in America. So the critical indicator was going in the wrong direction, and that, we think, is what finally caused Trump to listen to all of the saner voices around him, which were saying, you need a pause, you need to take a breath, because you've started an overwhelming cataclysm that you actually can't handle.
Yeah. The timeline that you provide for us, which people can read in the Times today, is absolutely superb. It is so worth people reading your piece. And I think, there are so many questions that come out of it, but one that is really being asked today, David, is why Donald Trump messaged by, at I think was at 9:37 a.m., ahead of what we then saw to be a change in direction of policy that would mean that the people who obeyed him would have made a substantial amount of money. Do you think that was a very deliberate rallying cry from him ahead of knowing what he was going to do, or just another piece of him saying, do this, and I actually have no idea by midday what I'm going to be thinking myself?
Well, I think I'll refer you to my earlier response, which was with Trump. It's normally a messy jumble of all of the above, because he hasn't got a clear strategic direction. in terms of what he's going to do with these tariffs. Trump often throws things out there just to see how everybody reacts, and then he responds accordingly. Well, in this case, this tweet, or rather this post on Truth Social that you're referring to, is really extraordinary. He put out, as you say, at around just after 9:30. Now is a great day to buy, and we think he'd probably almost made up his mind at that stage for this 90-day pause in his higher tariffs. Bear in mind, he's still got 10% tariffs on everybody, but these were the reciprocal, as you say, Liberation Day tariffs that were the higher tariffs that were only actually in force for 13 hours after he pulled the plug yesterday. And of course, if people had heeded that post and bought stocks, they would be quids in, because the stock market, the Nasdaq, rose over 12% upon his announcement just 3 hours or 3 and a bit hours after that. So yes, you can read that as some sort of insider tip if you think that, even if you think that Trump is that organized. I happen to think that he was putting it out as perhaps a last gasp appeal, just to see if people actually, what he really needed people to do was to buy the bonds. People had stopped buying the American treasuries. As I say, the 10-year treasury, the 30-year treasury, the rates were going up because they couldn't sell enough of them, and people had stopped buying them. That's what he wanted people to buy. It wasn't clear from the post, I think, in his mind, but the way it reads is buy the stocks which were going down, and then of course went up massively. So it is a terrible mess, and he can easily stand accused of sort of trying to, at the very least, influence the market. Of course he was trying to do that, but manipulate the market perhaps. Because one critical thing was that he'd watched Jamie Dimon, who he really respects, the head of JP Morgan, who was on Fox News just a little bit earlier. And JP Morgan, he was on, it's a Fox Business News program that Trump habitually watches. And we know he watched it because Trump later said, I think Jamie Dimon's a genius. And Jamie Dimon said, I do think that we're probably headed for a recession like this, and I think the bond markets are trying to tell us something. And I think that was the clincher when he watched that at it was about 8:30 in the morning, so an hour before that post.
Right. Well, can someone give Jamie Dimon his own network? We can just hope that President Trump tunes into wisdom at some stage. Could you also tell us a little bit more about who Scott Bessent is and why he is so influential?
So we used to say about the first term of Trump that there were at least some adults in the room, because he had a few people in his cabinet with a great experience of politics and business who made rather sensible suggestions about policy. Scott Bessent, he has picked for his Treasury Secretary is a hedge fund billionaire from South Carolina who is picked to join his cabinet, and has turned out to be perhaps what we would say the adult in the room of the second Trump term, because what we've seen is the Trump cabinet and advisors dividing into two very distinct camps. Those who have been egging him on with the tariffs as an end in themselves, that it will change the American economy, it will fund the Treasury. It will be just like the 1890s when you didn't need personal taxation, you just needed tariffs to fund the American economy. So those are people like Peter Navarro, his top trade advisor, and Howard Lutnick, another billionaire, actually a bond trader, but who's his commerce secretary. And on the other hand, you've got Scott Bessent, who's come in, who's a much more traditional market economist who's happy to use the tariffs as a short-term measure to negotiate freer trade. In other words, one camp is protectionist and one camp is basically free trade. And Bessent is the leader of the camp which says, yes, we know that you want to put tariffs on to raise a lot of money and to bring back manufacturing to America, but let's use them to get really great free trade deals around the world. And that camp also, it turns out, includes Elon Musk, who's been sending signals, of course, over the last week that he much prefers free trade, even though, as we're learning, Musk is out. Musk is nowhere to be seen, actually, at the moment.
Right. And do you think he's out for good?
Well, I think he is backing out because it's been, for all sorts of other reasons, the boycott of Tesla cars and the grief that he's getting personally, suffering his reputation has suffered, I think, for sticking too close to Trump. That he, just to save the Tesla business, actually, there were even board members on Tesla saying this has gone too far, and you need to decide whether you're a businessman or a politician.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's always good to talk to you. David Charter is Assistant US Editor at The Times.